Then we do come to item 1119, the temporary accommodation rentals. We do have two incredibly patient, if they're here, incredibly patient deputants. Luann DaCosta, Winchester Park Residents Association. Is Ms. DaCosta here?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your...
Just flowing through my legs right now. So.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem.
The Bible says the first shall be last and the last shall be first. So.
Yes. Well, there's a reward when I get home, so that's good. So thank you, Chair, Mayor Tory, and members of the committee. My name is Luann DaCosta, as you know. I live at 100 Bleecker Street, and I'm also a director on the Winchester Park Residents Association. I'm here, as you know, to speak to you about short-term or temporary rental accommodations. And Bleecker Street, again, is in Ward 28. And I think I can speak to it very intimately because I live next to one, and I've been living next to one since June. And I also live beside 4 short-term rental accommodations. Actually, in our row of 11 houses, there are now 4 that have been expressly bought and aggressively bought for the purpose of short-term rentals on sites like Airbnb and Flip Key Rentals. So right now, where I live, 106, 104, 96 beside me, and recently 92, which ironically was the last block-busted house in Toronto, which is in John Sewell's book, are now temporary rental accommodations. These homes are owned and operated by 2 individuals who own a business, who are real estate agents. Neither of them live in the homes and neither of them live in the city. Their business is in Markham. Each of these homes sleeps 12 to 16 people, and it costs about $300 a night to rent. So it's quite cheap for you to cram in people. You're paying about $20 a person to stay in. Often these homes, right now the 3 homes, are rented together, and together they can sleep up to 30 to 40 people. With a 4th house, which will soon be operating, that will go up to 50 people on my street a night. And it would be about $1,000 a night right now to rent them together. So you can imagine the types of guests that this attracts. So usually they're weddings, they're bachelor parties, their tours, their events. And these are residential homes, single-family homes. For residents like myself, we're dealing with constant noise complaints. We're dealing with, street parties and parties in the backyard that spill out onto our street. So it's not just homeowners, it's also residents in the co-ops across the street. It's also residents in apartment buildings up the street as well that are feeling this. There's drinking, there's loud music. It's really unpleasant. I'm regularly woken up almost every week where I have to go over to neighbors or guests and ask them to keep it down. There's excess garbage on the street. There's tour buses blocking our street, catering trucks, you name it. Multiple guests are given temporary parking permits and issued parking permits every week to park on our street. So it's taking up a lot of parking that residents need as well. There's significant safety issues. There's a gas line that was broken when a barbecue was being set up that, cost a lot of money for the city and everyone to come out as well, but it was very dangerous. There's been illegal activity as well in these drug use, prostitution. So this is what I'm living beside, and it's not very pleasant. Unlike regulated hotels and bed and breakfast, there's no regulation. There's no emergency plans. There's no concierge or security. It's the residents that are dealing with this. In addition to the impacts it's had on my quality of life and my neighbors' quality of life, we're losing neighbors. So, and these are neighbors that have lived in the community for years, that are vested in the community, like myself. Our most recent neighbor that sold, my neighbor, said that they were leaving because the character of the street was changing, and that was in part due to these temporary rental accommodations. Instead of neighbors, we have a constant stream of strangers coming in and out at all hours of the night, with no disregard for neighbors. So I would encourage you, there's a really great site if you want to look at the impact that this is having on our city. There's a site called Inside Airbnb, and it maps sites, particularly entire homes and apartments that are used as short-term rental accommodations. And what this site shows is that it shows how many apartments and accommodations are rented all year round, and it also shows that it's also displacing residents from the city and disrupting housing and communities. And this is what's happening on my street. I'd also urge you to look at other jurisdictions who are taking immediate steps to control negative impacts of temporary rental accommodations. And I think Toronto should too, and I think this motion is a step in the right direction. But look at New York City and look at Quebec, who are taking a strong stance to control illegal hotels and reducing rental stock and the negative impacts of short-term rental. In Vancouver, I've reached out to a researcher who's looking at the impact of growing short-term rentals on Vancouver's housing stock shortage that contravene zoning bylaws. We've met with Councillor McConnell, who was here earlier, and we appreciate her support on this. We think that this motion...
I need you to sum up.
Yep, okay. So this motion is very encouraging, but I think what I'd like to underline is that we need a solution very quickly. As this last house goes up, we're wondering what's next for our residents. And so I'm asking you for an immediate solution and to use the powers and tools that you have, municipal licensing and zoning bylaws, to do something very quickly.
Get you to sum up.
Sure. So before we lose more neighbors, before there's a risk to affordable housing and rental units, I'd ask you to take this very seriously and take some immediate action. Thank you.
Questions of the deputant by any members of the committee? Councillor Michael Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, through you. So what we're actually talking about here are properties that are for rent for short term that's used for parties or boisterous events. It is not, is it families moving in and just making noise?
It's both.
Okay.
Because it's the amount of people in a house, these are very small row houses that are single family residents. So if you can imagine having 12 to 16 people who will, those attract multiple families. It also attracts large events. So if you're having a wedding, you can have 3 families stay in all 3 homes, but in between those homes are residents like myself that live and work there. And so yeah, it does attract events. There's tour buses that pull up routinely on our street and block traffic.
So while it's rental, it is short-term rental, and it's specifically utilized for a variety of events that is obviously have an impact on the community, which is negative.
Yes, and especially when we have big events in the city, like Caravana or a game, we know that there's going to be multiple people staying on the street, and it's really taking advantage of Airbnb and these sites. It's not that we're against Airbnb. In fact, one of our neighbors rents out to Airbnb, but he lives in the house. So we can go to him and say, listen, your tenants, or your guests rather, are out of order. But in these 3 houses and now 4 houses, there's no one. We don't know where the owners are. They're not there. So we're left to kind of mitigate this, and I've often been banging on doors asking people to keep it down. I have a 4-year-old child that shares a wall with this. It is not a pleasant place to live, and it really is forcing neighbors out. My concern is once the 4th house comes up, my one neighbor is sandwiched between them. I feel that if one more neighbor goes, the rest of us are going to go. And it'll change. I don't know if you know Bleecker Street, but we are the little bit of houses on that street. I think we're really important to that street. We're middle-class families, very diverse. We have co-ops across the street who are also impacted by this. So I think we're really important, and we're really invested in this community. And the people that are running these short-term rental accommodations are not. They're not in the community. There's no benefit to the community because people get in cabs, they go downtown, they're not staying in this community. And they're in every 2 to 3 days. So it's a very high turnover rate, and it's a very stressful place to be.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Other questions of Mr. Costa? Thank you very much. It was
Thank you very much.
Very useful to hear you.
Thank you.
A bit of your real life lived experience.
Yes, for sure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Brian Kello. Mr. Kello here? He's not here? He had to leave? He did. Well, thank you for your patience. Okay. Okay, that's the end of the deputations. Then are there questions of staff? Are there speakers from outside the committee? There aren't any left from outside the committee, so we don't have to canvass that. Are there speakers, people wishing to speak from inside the committee? Councillor McMahon.
Great. So I have a motion, and I think Councillor Shiner has a motion too to complement this. So I was just, I saw the report, and I was just concerned with the what was put forth by Councillor Wong Tam. So I wanted to add, if we're doing a report, we should look at everything, not just that list. So we added more. I worked with Councillor Balau as well on the rental issue as well, and we've cleared it all with staff, and it should be good complemented with Councillor Shiner's motion, which he will talk about. I just want, if we're having the discussion, let's do it in one fell swoop, have the report. It's a big project, but let's get all the information. to debate. Thanks.
Councilman Wong, speak. Okay, please do then.
Yeah, I'm happy to support it. I just want to say the deputy was fabulous, and how great it is to have someone who's never come here before, who doesn't have a vested interest, who just like speaks her mind and just makes her points succinctly and like bang on. It's like fantastic. More people like her, please.
She was good. Okay. Councilor Shiner, did you wish to speak?
So if the clerk could put up the motion that we have. And the motion is to take the letter from Councillor Wong Tam and the motion by Councillor McMahon, send it to the Chief Planner and the Executive Director of City Planning and Executive Director of Municipal Licensing, and have them come back to us, tell us recommendations how we can move forward on this. I have nothing wrong with any of the recommendations that are here, and I've had sites in my ward that became party houses. So every weekend, there was a wedding, there was an event, there was a party, there was drinking. It was horrible for the neighbors. Airbnb. Couldn't find the owners, couldn't deal with it. I've experienced the issues myself, and I know how difficult it can be. But the internet is the internet, and it's very hard to be able to deal with the issues. And I think we need a succinct work plan to look at what we can and can't do and how we should tackle the problem over here with this. I also don't want to, in any way, allow Airbnb to become a backdoor in for rooming houses, where it could be considered an Airbnb house where we don't allow rooming houses in particular areas, and all of a sudden the approvals we put that if you advertise at Airbnb, it's a week, it's a month, it's 6 months, it's your whole term at the school, and all of a sudden it's a rooming house for students, and it becomes legal, and we never expected it to be in certain areas. So all these things are very complicated, and I think Councillor McMahon's motion kind of said how complicated it is when you look at all the people she asked to be consulted. That's a huge list and a mammoth task for staff to figure out a way to deal with this. So I'm looking for directions how we can deal with it to come forward, get them back to committee, give staff instructions on how to move with it and start to deal with the problem that is there.
Thanks, Councillor Shiner. I'll speak, and also Councillor Bailo first. Other speakers?
Very
Councillor Bailo?
Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting the recommendations, the motions, just because Airbnb, and I think the letter that actually the deputant sent us mentioned that, it started with people renting a one-bedroom inside their home, and actually, it's a little bit of an extra income for some people. It's an affordability issue as well, so great. What we're having now is entire houses, entire apartments, and actually the effect that might be having on our city when we only have a vacancy rate of 1.6%, I think needs to start to be looking at. So the safety of the people, and how do you guarantee, the safety of 12, a home that is being rented for 12 people, and the second, the impact that is having on our rental market, I think is really important things that need to be taken in consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Bailo. I just really want to say that I will support both motions. I think it is a sensible way to deal with this. I think that Councillor McMahon's amendment